The firstborn is the only child in the family, even if you only have one child, who starts out with full attention from either your carer or your carers and then loses it because they have to share. Middle children are the least likely to seek psychological help in their lives. They really do know how to schmoo. They also learn that the best way to get attention is to be cute and be the baby. And so they're very good showmen. They're very good act. They're often in drama. The way we interact in our small family group lays the foundation for how we interact for the rest of our lives in small groups. So they tend to push themselves harder than many people. They are more prone to burnout than a lot of people. The point of birth order is that the way we interact.
Hi, welcome to the Optimising Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimizing your performance, productivity, success, and well-being. My name is Estelle Reid, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Outer Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism, and Stress. So, if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. I really love my job because today I get to interview one of my book heroes. It's a book I've recommended to family, friends, clients, and it really changed my perspective on things. It helped me to understand who I am. It helps my clients to understand who they are, but also why we all behave the way that we do. Her name is Dr. Linda Blair. She's a chartered clinical psychologist, writer, speaker, and broadcaster. And the name of her book is Birth Order: What Your Position in Family Really Tells You About Your Character. One of the other things I love about Linda, she's also written 5 books altogether, is that she's been on one of my favourite shows. So she's been on Child of Our Times. So I don't know if you watched that documentary. It started in the year 2000 and it followed the development and growth of a number of children right through up until age 20. And Linda appeared on that television show. Along with, she's been on the Vanessa Show, the One Show. So it's going to be really exciting to meet her, and I hope you find it really useful. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to get straight to it. And the first question is always so that the audience can get a sense of who you are, Linda. So what does your typical day look like?
You almost can't say that with me because I'm lucky enough now, because I'm in my mid 70s, to work for myself. So I can allow the day to be what it demands of me or what I choose of it. And hopefully there's a nice balance between the two. So usually I get up with the sunrise if I can. In the winter, of course, that would take you a long time to get started. So maybe a little earlier in the winter. And I stretch and I do a lot of yoga and balancing and tiny bit of cardio, not a lot because I'm a little lazy. And then I go down and have gallons of tea and feed my dogs, which is a really nice way to start the day. I don't turn on any electronics. We just commune down there. And then with breakfast, I will check my emails and make sure there isn't anything important to miss. And then I usually ring fence the first part of the morning for this sort of grounding, which takes me longer than it used to when I was younger. But that's because I'm older and I have come to just accept that rather than fight it. So the next thing I do is, depending on the weather, I either ride on my bike a bit, my seat, one of those indoor jobs, which I hate, or more over, and hopefully I go out with my dogs for a good hour of air and thought and greeting other dog lovers, which is a really great thing when you bond with other people. You don't know their names, you know their dogs' names, you don't know their names, but you really get a community feeling. It's wonderful. And then I'm ready for my day. I may have a smattering of time to have a quick swim or something like that. So it's still very physical. But then I do whatever is demanded, meetings, podcasts, a lot of writing. Writing is my favorite activity. I prefer that, but I also have later afternoon clinics on about 3 days a week, mostly online, but some are face to face. And then really with supper, it's wind down time, devices off, and I play the piano or I don't know, do some more yoga. And so I'm really leisurely. I'm very lucky. The work is very condensed in the day, but it's very focused when I do it. There's research that I adhere to and also teach when I'm talking to kids, which I do a lot about how to prepare for exams. And that is that in 24 hours, there's really only 4 hours that you can use for creative, focused thinking. Beyond that, you either waste your time or you start feeling bad about your abilities because, of course, your brain's tired. And so after 4 hours, that's it. I stop. And it works. And funnily enough, I read someone else just talked about Mark Manson, I think it was, or somebody like that. He talked about that recently. It is a well accepted finding.
I use the same principle actually with coaching
Ah, very good. Yeah. Yeah.
because I find that my brain is just kaput otherwise. So
So you
I,
came to it that way, or did you come to it by reading that's what you should do?
when I did the research for my first book, that's how I came to it.
Okay.
And so I optimized my day that way. But your morning routine sounds brilliant. And there's one thing that you said, which was you do grounding. So
Yeah.
what's that? How do you do that?
I suppose there's some self-talk involved. I do ask myself, I feel well and I feel grateful for that. And I think of all the fun things in my life, like all my friends, and the fact that we only just moved, did a downsize a year ago, and what a wonderful house I have, and the views out on green, which I didn't have before, which is so nice. It's just coming to a center of oneself. I think everybody will do it differently, but it's within, not without. So you do not turn anything on. No TVs, no telephones, no nothing. Just be there.
Wow, loads of tips already.
That's nice.
That's brilliant. So, how do you become a chartered clinical psychologist, a writer, a speaker? What's your origin story? And a broadcaster. How did you come to be?
I think probably I'll use it as a tip by the end, but the words say yes. I don't know, but I do know that when opportunities arose, I took them. And I think that's how, because there was no plan like this. I had no idea. When I was 10, back in the Midwest in America, to the right of politics as far as you go, to the right of everything, we were Bible Belt. There was a great and famous psychiatric institution in my town called the Menninger Foundation. And so there were huge numbers of psychiatrists. My parents were doctors, but my mom was a nurse, my dad was a doctor. But the psychology was a real influence. And I was a babysat for all the different psychiatrist kids. And it was just in the air. And I remember my very first play in primary school. They asked me to play the psychiatrist. You might wonder why they were having a play with a psychiatrist for 10-year-olds. I don't remember that, but I do remember that they asked me to do it. And I remember thinking, I feel real comfortable here. When I went to university, which was unusual in the Midwest, not to go to university, but to go to university on the East Coast rather than in the state of Kansas where I grew up, because of my class of 407 of us went out of state. You just don't, you stay. But my mother had ambitions for me, and I did not thank her at the time. I thanked her many times after. but at the time I didn't want to leave my friends. But when I went, I had it in my mind that in this lovely liberal arts college in Boston that I would learn Chinese. I have no idea why, but I wanted to. So I went into the Chinese class and everybody else was Chinese except me. They were just learning a different dialect, and I knew that I was going to fail compared to them. And I did not want to be failing in my first term at a semester at college. So I went to my tutor and I said, I don't think Chinese is the right choice. And he said, okay, but the only class that still got spaces is psychology. Would you take that? And I said, oh, okay. So I ended up doing psychology and I loved it. And so when it came time to graduate, then I applied to graduate school in psychology, but it was also the swinging 60s, and I met a guy that talked like the Beatles, and he was really cool. And so he said, why don't you come to England with me? And I thought, okay. So off to England I went without my passport, by the way. I didn't know you needed passports. I had to get one in custom. Oh, it was a mess. But anyway, I got there. And of course, after weeks, I realized that the job that I had been promised didn't pan out because these things happen. I needed another one. So I ended up going to my boyfriend's department of mathematics. And see, here's another thing that just happened. I didn't plan it. And I said, look, I can type because all Americans can type. This was back in the old days. And so you need a secretary, I'll do it. And the guy said, okay, we have someone here who some of the secretaries don't like to take his dictation because sometimes he drools. And I said, that doesn't bother me. I'm a medical family. Guess who it was? It was someone called Professor Stephen Hawking. And so I had the awesome privilege of hearing that man when he could still speak. And it was game changing for me to not judge a book by its cover. Here's this guy in a wheelchair, all slumped over. The people that didn't know him would talk to him like he didn't have a brain. And he thought it was hilarious. He was a wonderful man, but it just taught me so much. But I didn't do that for very long because there was a job that I saw advertised working with animals, and I thought that'd be great fun. So I applied. And again, do you really want this whole story?
You
You like
say,
this?
I want
All right.
to. I've got questions to ask you already.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Okay, I went to this interview and it was about pigeons, dissecting and understanding bonding, imprinting with pigeons. And I know nothing about pigeons. And the guy figured that out pretty quickly. And he said, why don't you just go talk to our director? Because really, this isn't your job. So I went in and the director just looked at me with the look that I got to know very well over the next 2 years. And he said, what do you really want to do? And out of my mouth, but not my consciousness, came, I really want to understand relationships in families. And he said, isn't that lucky? Because that's what I study. And this morning, my research assistant resigned. And that's when it all happened.
Oh,
It was Medical Research Council. I worked on mother-infant relationships in monkeys. We had a troop of monkeys on the site in Cambridge, and I observed them every day, and we studied what makes a good mother. And on the back of that, I got into Harvard for a PhD and I began that and I got halfway through. And then my boyfriend, same boyfriend at that point, said, I don't really think I like America, so I'm going back to England. And I think if you want our relationship to last, you better come. So I doodled around and then I did go. And after a couple of years, I, of course, didn't know quite what to do because I hadn't finished my PhD. So I met someone at a party and he said, clinical psychology is really in need and you don't have to be tied to a university, which is so hard to establish status in. Apply for it. So I did, and I got in. It turned out this guy ran psychology in the Cambridge area, so he got me a job when I finished, and I was in clinical psychology from then on. The
wow.
broadcasting just happened because, again, I was at the hospital working, and somebody shouted down the corridor, "Hey, the BBC wants somebody to talk about phobias. Anybody here want to do it?" And I thought, "Oh, that'll be fun." So I did it, and the guy cut the mic halfway through the interview and put a song on. He goes, "Listen, you're great because you're easy." He said, "You want to come every week?" So that's how it all took. And then from that came TV. And from that, I met the gal who founded Psychologist magazine. And she said, would I like to be the first dilemma doctor there? And then the Guardian said, would you like to be our agony? It just all took off by saying yes. By
Yes,
saying yes, listening to what you're offered and taking a chance.
that is great. And what a lot of fantastic opportunities that came.
I did, but so do your
Yeah,
listeners have them. If they
yeah,
just listen,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
there.
What is it you love about your area? Being a psychologist, you said you loved it. So what
I
is
love
it?
it.
So what do you love about it?
The privilege of being told things that I think often those people don't tell anybody else. What an honor. And to work with them. I will never forget it. There was a guy called Larry LaShawn who's a healer. I don't suppose he's alive now, but he can be called nothing else. He's a medical doctor, but he could just help. And one of the things he said in the talk I went to that he gave was always remember that when a patient, we called him in those days rather than client, comes into the room, there are two people in that room who are experts. One is an expert on the illness that perhaps is a problem, and the other is the expert on the body or mind of that's going to be addressed. And so you are equal. And that is how I
Mm.
hope I proceed. And it's just so much fun to work with somebody,
Yes. We are, I obviously work in a different way, but we are so privileged to
aren't we?
hear those stories, aren't we?
Aren't
And to
we?
be trusted with those
Yep.
stories.
Yep. And to be
Um,
given permission to search for connections that are quite random sometimes on initial enlightenment. And they may work and they may not, but you get the fun of saying, could that be because of, or do you think this is actually a strength you're overlooking, or whatever?
I love that pattern spotting.
That's a better way to put it. Good
No,
job.
no. So, right, Stephen Hawkins. So you said he taught you lots. What did he teach you?
He just taught me humility and that you don't look at what you don't judge by what you wait and hear what's really there. He had a
Mm,
great sense of humor. He was, of course, probably one of the most brilliant men of last century. And yet there was nothing but fun. He had fun. And he didn't mind if people did judge him by his cover.
wow,
Yeah, that takes a lot, doesn't it?
it really does. And I wonder how he did that.
I don't know. I don't know. When
Mm,
remember he had limited ability to talk by then, and so you wouldn't ask boring questions. I just was there to take his wisdom and write it down. So I wouldn't ask him things like that
mm,
because I wouldn't
mm.
waste his effort. It was an effort for him to speak.
So, next question. You mentioned earlier that you studied what it takes to be a good mother. What did you
Yeah.
glean? What did you glean from
Well,
that?
what was really interesting, and the paper we wrote caused the professor that I was working with called Robert Hind, who was great, and he was in Bowlby's era and all that, the attachment and all that. What we found was that with the little monkeys, they spend about, I can't remember now, but some number of weeks, where they gradually stop being what we call ventral ventral, which is just on their mom's front, being able to see their mom, which is a very natural way for many mammals to carry their babies. We ought to too. I always had a sling after I studied that when I had my kids, but they want to see your face. And they gradually go off, mom, a little farther, and they run back whenever until they don't need to run back. And what makes a good mother is not how many times the mother rescues the baby when he looks like he might be in danger, not how many times the baby runs to mom. In other words, these real bold babies that hardly ever did. Wasn't necessarily a secure attachment. But what made this secure attachment is that the mother understood when the baby wanted to be picked back up. She watched the baby and looked for cues of neediness for that moment, and she knew when to let go so the baby could go and explore.
Mm.
And that's what mattered.
Yeah,
So
no.
The key is to tune into your child. And that's why I crusade against putting between you and the child any screens.
Yes.
Face to face. I saw an example not too long ago on the bus when I was coming back home where this little baby, mother had a little baby in a cot. And the baby started screaming. And of course, the mother was mortified. She's a young gal. And she didn't want to make a fuss. And so she was trying to soothe the baby. The baby wouldn't soothe, crying. So she stuck a cartoon on her screen in front of the baby. And of course, then it couldn't see her and it screamed louder. And in desperation, she put her phone down in her bag and she picked the baby up to cuddle it. And of course, immediately it was quiet and calm.
Ah,
And that's what babies need. That's
mm.
all they need.
No, you really make me think about when my daughter first started school, and it was really hard. We had a really hard 6 weeks, that back and forth, and every day was a challenge. And I felt like a really bad mother. I felt like I'd done something wrong. Oh, she's all the other kids were like flying off in, see you, mum. No problem at all. And
So she was just a
yeah,
little slower to start, that's all.
yeah,
We all develop at different rates.
yeah. No, that's so true. And you were saying earlier that you found an interest in family dynamics, and tell me about that. Where did that come from?
I don't know. I don't know why that came out of my mouth. I do not know. I think perhaps because I was one of six and we were all so different. And my parents were independent each of the other and of us quite a lot, quite early. And we were just, I don't know, it was a small town and there was one other family that had six kids and the dad a doctor and we were good friends with them. And so there was 12 of us. And I just was fascinated by who ended up being playing with whom and who wanted to be with whom and who sorted things out. It just fascinated me. I don't know why. I guess that's what I was lucky enough young on to find the thing that's my passion because we all have a passion and a unique skill. And I do workshops on how you refine that if you have lost it, which many people have because they're just so busy nowadays. And all of a sudden they get to retirement and they go, what do I do? Because I don't know what I really love anymore. And so we use my method to get back to that.
Oh, that's great. And what does your method involve?
Going back to the age at which you are most truly yourself. Do you know when that is?
I I'm always brought back to a memory when I used to play flower factory girls, where we used to make perfume, and I love this concept of making stuff out of nothing.
Right. Okay.
And then the other moments, which I think has shaped my career, is I used to love watching people on the bus.
Okay. And how old were you for those two?
I was about 7 for the perfume factory thing, and I guess I'm introverted. One memory sticks to mind when I was at college, so I must have been about 16.
Okay. The second one, I'm not so sure is as much true you as the first one.
Yeah.
Let me explain. When we're born, the lucky thing of studying other species is the behavior in a wider context. And human beings spend relatively more of their life being entirely dependent on their own kind than any other species on Earth. So when you're born, you are not yourself. Your only aim is to be cared for because if you're not cute and therefore attractive to your carers, you die. There is no middle ground. So at the beginning, all you are is keen to attract the attention of your carers. It's not you at all. As you get more independent and you can get the cereal down yourself and tie your own shoes and all that sort of thing, then you get closer to having time to do what your uniqueness tells you to do, like flower children,
Mm.
whatever you were talking about. And that carries on and develops until a terrible thing happens, which is called adolescence. And as soon as puberty kicks in, all you want to do is belong. You want to find your group and belong to that group. And only, as Eric Erickson says at the very end of that, do you want to know how you are unique in that group. Okay, so there you are at 17 or 18, starting to go back to your real self. How I know now I'm a goth or I'm a scholar or I'm whatever, but now how am I different than everybody else so that I know who I am within my group? But all of a sudden, what happens? Probably you're leaving home. You might be going to uni where you have to do a bunch of belonging all over again. You might do training, again, needing to belong. You might be having a baby. You're looking for a partner. You got to start paying for rent or a mortgage. On it goes until retirement. And then you go, wait a minute, who am I? What do I want to do with this next chapter? So you look back to just before adolescence.
So is there a specific age where the, we get our purpose? Because there is another
No,
moment.
no, because adolescence is different in each person. Onset of puberty,
Mm.
it's moving back. I used to say 11, 12 because I
Yeah.
did put an age on it foolishly because that's about when puberty used to set in. It now, you know, the average age of puberty is now 9.
Gosh.
Yes, and it's moving back. And in the West, it moved back faster than where there's not quite so much overnutrition because a lot of it is having an abundance of food make you develop more quickly. But you really have to play it by ear, by era and community and diet and all kinds of things. So it's better done in retrospect.
Mm.
You don't really know at the time that, oh, I'm being myself because here I am playing the psychiatrist in my school play. But you look back and you go, aha, that's when I was. And quite
Mm.
often in the workshops, people will then go home and call their parents or their siblings and say, what was I like when I was 9? Or they go get out their memorabilia that they had when they were kids or what they did in school and rediscover who they were.
This is really making me think. So I will go off and have a think then.
You
Because
you don't want to tell something. I can
no,
see that on your face.
yeah, no. I so optimizing brilliance is a theme. I love helping people. There was an early memory, but this sounds like it's outside of the scope of what you're saying. When I was about 2.5, I can remember looking at my mum and thinking I really want to help her because she was sad, upset. My mum and
Oh,
dad had a big fight,
oh,
and we were hiding in the cellar actually.
uh-huh.
And I've always been someone who wants to help other
Yeah.
people. So there was that element. And then the other element was not doing very well at school. So we're neurodiverse in our family. And in the 80s, they just used to put you on the thick table. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't know what to. I knew I was intelligent, but I just found it really difficult to learn.
Uh-huh.
So
Learn
consequently,
their way. You
yes.
learned, but
Yes, exactly. And so then once things clicked in my career, oh, I can be good at what I do. So then it became about helping others to do that as well and
Mhm,
to
mhm.
believe in themselves.
And that's the optimizing brilliance because you
Yeah.
found your brilliance or your unique gift or whatever word the guru who's talking about it says. But we all talk about that because that is the quintessence of happiness and of fulfillment is when
Yes.
you connect with that. The best term, I think, it came from Csikszentmihalyi, who calls it flow. And
Right.
it is when you're in flow
Yeah.
you are most fully yourself and you have no concept of time. You are fully engaged and stretched in what you're doing to the extent of your being. You may not be happy. People think, oh, you're joyful. No, you may be trying very hard. You may be winning the marathon. Who knows? But you are fully in that moment with every bit of you.
Mm.
That's your
Yeah.
gift.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So can we talk about your book? The book that really, I was saying earlier that it really changed my perspective on family dynamics. It's really helped me with my clients. It's helped them to understand their position in the family, but also how they operate even within their leadership teams.
Wow. Yes, of
You
course.
know, like they'll go, oh, they're a second born and I'm a firstborn. And so can we get
Yep.
into all of that?
Yep, sure. I so enjoyed that book. Of all the books I've written, that was the most fun. But it was interesting how it started because my publisher or my agent, I can't remember who, somebody came and said, would you like to write a book on birth order? And I said, I'm very insulted. I said, I'm not an astrologer. This isn't your star sign. I'm sorry, I do science. And then I thought, I had an amazing thought, which was, thank goodness I did, which was that I have three children and they are all firstborns. How did that happen?
How did that happen?
They're not triplets, they're adopted. Each of them is a firstborn in their biological family.
Yes.
I adopted them very young, but nonetheless, that's what they were. And yet, my eldest had the traits of the eldest, the middle, very middle child, and the youngest, quintessentially youngest. And I thought, wait a minute, there's something here. There isn't very much research on it because, first of all, it requires a longitudinal study, and most academics are just keen to get their tenure. It's so hard these days to get grants and tenure, so they can't do these 20-year studies anymore like they used to be able to. So there isn't much longitudinal research. And secondly, another way to do it would be to clone people and put them in different birth order positions. And you can imagine that ethically probably wouldn't go down very well. We have to rely mainly on clinical anecdotes. But luckily, of course, I had a shed load of them. And the patterns were very, very powerful. Of course, they never apply to everybody because almost nothing in human science is universal. A few small things like that we all have atoms in them. It's about that obvious. Everything has exceptions, but in general, there were definite trends.
And what are those trends?
The firstborn is the only child in the family, even if you only have one child, who starts out with full attention from either your carer or your carers and then loses it because they have to share. An only child, I like to call them single children because only sounds so lonely, they never lose it. They always have that attention. But that attention, as I explained to you earlier in this discussion, is that which kept you alive. It is more important than anything else. So to lose that is devastating. So even though your little Johnny or Freddie tells you that they can't wait to have a brother or sister, they don't know that they won't want it when it happens. Because, of course, they have to share you. And that sharing means that for the rest of their life, they're always trying to get approval from people who are in positions of authority, people, parental figures. So they tend to push themselves harder than many people. They are more prone to burnout than a lot of people. They're very hard on themselves, harder than many. They demand so much. But at the other side, they're more likely to be carers than any other child. Now, why is that? Once the jealousy calms down enough to not just hate that little baby who's taken all their interest of their parents away from them, they realize, aha, I can get their attention back if I help. So they ask, can I help? Can I look after the baby? Can I hand you the nappy? They get great at caring. And so it's no surprise that firstborns, even taking into account that there are more firstborns than any other birth order position, are most likely to be ones who are in caring jobs, social services, teaching, psychology, doctors, nurses, the whole gamut.
Mm.
So that's the sort of picture. In every birth order position, there's goods and bads. So I've given you a balanced picture there of firstborns. They're very likely to succeed in school as well. I forgot to say, because like only children who also are likely to succeed in school, they get this rich vocabulary input because they're getting it mainly from adults, not from siblings whose language is only forming also really intensely during the first 18 months. And that's when a lot of our vocabulary and grammatical structure, if you study Chomsky and things, is laid down. So if you do well in language, you almost certainly do well in school. So there's that. So there you go. Then what about middle child? Middle children are not the black sheep. They're not the loner, the weirdo. That's wrong. Of all the birth order positions, middle children are the least likely to seek psychological health and help in their lives. They really do know how to schmooze, as we say, to get along with people, to not stir up trouble, because that was their game. Because the older child was bigger and could beat them up or whatever if they did wrong. And the little one had this atomic bomb, which was called mom, because they were the baby. So you had to be careful. And they learn street smarts better than any other kids. So they're great in group work, in open plan offices, as long as they're not too introverted. That sort of group stuff they're good at. The downside is they're sometimes too responsive to other people, and they can be easily led if they get in the wrong groups. So you have to keep an eye, if you're a parent, that they don't get led astray in their efforts to get along. Also, and I found this fascinating, if somebody comes into me as say, depressed and says, and I say, if I could wave a wand and take that all away, which I do sometimes, I don't take it away. I say that. I wish I could. Then I say, what would you do? And if they say, oh, I don't know, then you say, are you a middle child? And they go, how did you know? They don't spend enough time on themselves, middle children. So they often are lost and they don't quite know where to go. They are the kid in the family. If anybody's going to go on a trend like goth or funny makeup or something, they'll do it. If anybody in the family is going to champion an underdog, because they are often the overlooked one, the middle kid, they are the ones. They'll raise money for charity and do that kind of thing. The one I can't explain to you, I'm sorry, is that if they are the one who's most likely to leave home at the youngest age, I don't know why. I can't explain that. Nobody who's I've given that information to can explain it either, but it tends to happen, not always, but. And of course, there are many middles. And by the way, if you have more than about five in your family, you break into mini families because it's just a natural thing that we group in small groups, so 3 or 4 at a time. Then we've got the youngest. And the youngest child is in a tough position these days because we have a lot more control, or we think we do anyway, as adults, over when we're going to stop and start our families. And so we usually know this is our last child. So in, we're very ambivalent, most parents, especially caring, really mothery type ones, because on the one hand, they say, thank God I never want to see the back of another nappy in my life. But on the other hand, they go, oh, my last baby. And so there's a sort of conflict in the youngest child about when to leave home, when to grow up, when to be grown up. They also learn that the best way to get attention is to be cute and be the baby. And so they're very good showmen. They're a very good act. They're often in drama. My youngest was brilliant in drama. They play the part. They know how to gain attention and be funny and cute. They're often comedians, that kind of thing. And they're often the most creative in what they do for their hobbies or their career. Why is that? One of the main job descriptions of children is to say, what are the limits here in this family? What can I get away with? Because if they don't know what the limits are, they're not going to be able to set their own limits when they're older. So that's why I have to get parents to be very firm about their limits, whatever they choose, as long as they're not harmful. And so with the first child, you parents out there know perfectly well that you had a lot of stupid rules that you thought were important, but you realized weren't. So you drop those. You drop them with the next child. You drop more. So by the time you get to the youngest child, the limits are high and they're wide, and so they take risks. They go farther before they hit the wall. So they're more risk-taking, more creative, and they also adopt things to excel in that are more unusual because almost certainly the oldest child has bagged academic success. You want something that makes you stay and care in the light of your parents in their interests. So either academic success or caring. and the middle child has to go near that, but not quite. So it's maybe sports, maybe music, something like that, where they're good at. But then the youngest, we're getting wider and wider. And if you have about five kids, I'm getting really, my fifth sister designs glass tables. It really gets wild. And that's great because, oh God, I can't think of his name, but Born to Win, the guy that wrote Born to Win, he was studying who makes breakthroughs. And it's the youngest kids that make the creative breakthroughs. The oldest kids make the scientific breakthroughs, but the academic
Mm.
way of thinking. Yeah. I'm not always that interesting. So there you go. There's the book. I hope people would still might like to buy it, but I've given you the book.
No, as I say, it's one of my favorite books. I recommend it all the time to my clients. And for those of you that are listening, so the title of the book is Birth Order, What Your Position in the Family Really Tells You About Your Character, and it's by Linda Blair. Can we also just dip into your time on Child of Our Time?
Child of Our Time with Robert
Yeah,
Winston.
yeah.
I had a very cameo role. He was the star. Robert Winston was brilliant. He really was good. Yeah, I'm sure those of you who saw it remember it was a group of children that were chosen in the year 2000 and to follow their trajectory. And I had to set a task for some of the kids. I can't remember that day's filming very well, but the one I do remember was the next day's filming where I had to set a challenge to a group of the parents. They had to build a tent, I think it was, really fast. And then by watching what they were doing, guess their birth order. I didn't do very well. If you take just one little tiny example, it's hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
especially when you know you're being watched because, the Heisenberg uncertainty. If you're being watched, it affects you. I don't know, but it was good fun. It was good fun.
Yeah.
So it was really adding to the knowledge about the uniqueness of the children in these families and their position in the family and in their level of development. And it was
Mm.
great fun.
No, my husband and I used to watch it religiously.
Yeah,
And so they stopped recording when they were about 20. Is that
that's right.
right? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
No, he had a great, I don't know if it was his idea or not, but the idea was great. I loved it. Oh God, only about 4 years ago, I was walking somewhere and this woman accosted me and she said, Linda, hi. And I said, who are you? And she was one of the producers, and I didn't even recognize her. It was a bond. We all did have a bond as soon as I knew who she was, of course. But it was almost like a family within itself, a bigger family with the little
Yeah.
things. It
Yeah.
was fun.
Ah. So we're going to start drawing things to a close. I've been like transfixed watching you.
That's very nice of you.
So interesting. So one of the routines is the previous guest will leave a question, and Dr. Fawad Mian's question was for you, what steps can you take to lead your best life?
I think I've already said it, haven't I? Welcome in opportunities. Be ready for opportunities and welcome them in. Be unafraid to try.
No, and I love the fact that you say yes to things.
Yeah.
Really love that. What question would you like to leave for the next guest?
I always like this one. This is not new, but I love this one. If you could invite three people, living or dead, to have dinner with you, who would you invite?
Oh, brilliant.
I just think that's so interesting because people have to trawl a really wide range of role models by doing that. And they also have to think of birth order because they have to think not of what the birth order of the people are, but how are they going to interact in that small group? Because remember, the point of birth order is that the way we interact in our small family group lays the foundation for how we interact for the rest of our lives in small groups. You can change it, but you have to be very aware of it and understand it.
Yeah,
So I would
no,
like to know, three is about right because they don't have three kids now as the majority, but that'll do.
yeah, no, that's a great question. And then to summarize, so thinking either about your career, your life, or your book, what are three actionable tips or steps that you could recommend for listeners?
One of them I've already said, which is to be aware, be alert for opportunities and give them a go if you can. The second one is to treat other people as equals, to yourself as an equal. You too are equal because, of course, much of what I work with is low self-esteem. But you're just as worthy as the other people, but also the other people who may have weird views in your opinion or funny habits, they're still equals. And that is why recently the Guardian asked a couple of us agony aunts to, which is I did for a while, to name the one self-help book that you think is of all self-help books the best. And I did the Dalai Lama's book on achieving happiness because what he says is that you can be happiest if you regard yourself and everyone else as equal. Okay, so you're as interested in them as you are in yourself, but you're also interested in value yourself. So it's a nice playing field. It's a Buddhist sort of, but I love it. And I think that does bring you happiness and gets you out of this Western idea that everything's about I, judgment. The third one, it comes from my childhood. I was looked after because remember I said my parents were independent. They worked like stink. So we were on our own for quite a lot. And we had this wonderful woman who looked after us. I don't know, she wasn't a nanny. She couldn't even read, but she was the best person. And she was half Afro-American and half Cherokee Indian, I think. And so she had all these Cherokee Indian things that she would tell us. I loved it. And one of them was never judge another person until you've walked in their moccasins for one full moon.
Yes.
So that's the third one.
Yeah.
Stop and take the viewpoint of the other person. Why do they have these ridiculous views that you think are ridiculous? What's brought them to that? Because they believe in them. And that helps you maintain a relationship or at least understand if you don't want the relationship, at least you can understand better why it's out there.
No, that's great. That's really fab. So how can people get access to you? So either through your books, your writing, your courses.
My favorite thing is to give workshops. My book, The Key to Calm, which I wrote after birth, I've made into a workshop on how to start with mindfulness, but to find your best way of being. And I've got a workshop which I love to give. And I can do it as a half day or a 2 hour, or I can do it as a whole day, but that's pretty tiring for people. But I love that. So to be able to do that is my best privilege. But there's my books. I suppose you put my
Yes, it's in your QR code. People can scan it. What is your website address? Just remind me.
lindablair.co.uk.
Right.
Pretty easy.
No, that's great.
Yeah, and make sure it's .co.uk because the other Linda Blair, which we all know was the star of The Exorcist, does not appreciate approaches for therapy. There was a funny moment, which I really probably shouldn't tell you, but it was so funny. I was asked to do a quote for one of the Sunday newspapers. I forget one of them. And they said, can we have a headshot? And I said, of course you can have a headshot. I'll get a headshot. So they called me right back and they said, actually, we have one on file. And I thought, oh, that's good. I won't have to send it. And the next morning, all my friends were calling me and they said, Linda, you look so good. Wow, what's happened? And of course, it was this movie star, that Linda Blair. And she has since called herself the real Linda Blair. So I don't think she really liked that. I didn't mean to. I didn't do that, but it's what happened. Anyway,
that is
so
brilliant.
it's .co.uk, not the American Linda Blair, who I am American by birth, and we do come from neighboring states, and we do talk alike, but we're very different.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming on. Seriously, it's been absolutely wonderful.
It's been easy to talk to you. You're easy to talk to. I see why you're a coach, but good. I'm glad. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereed.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reid, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimising Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.